first of all, it is important to mention that not all the figures for 2012-13 are available. Having said that, I've still tried to provide as clear a situation as possible in relation to the 2012-13 situation. We will provide tonight an overview of costs for students going to university in 2012-13. As you can see there, the cost of higher education falls under two categories. Students can take out a loan for tuition fees, and this pays for the course. Course costs will vary, they currently vary and will continue to vary when your son or daughter goes to university. The tuition fees, this has been the biggest change since the coalition government has come into power in terms of how much students will pay to go to university for their tuition fees, but we'll talk about that later. The loan for tuition fees is non-income assessed, so every student is entitled to the full loan for tuition fees regardless of household income. Students can also take out a loan for living costs, sometimes referred to as a maintenance loan, and this covers the cost for living expenses. This loan, however, is partially income assessed, and again we'll explain that shortly. Since 2006, the aim of the Higher Education Bill has been that students should no longer pay for their tuition or their maintenance up front. Students will take out loans to cover the costs of their university education and pay for it later when they are earning. Okay, if we talk about tuition fees first of all, remember what I've said already, all students can take out a full loan for a tuition fee to cover the full costs of their tuition fees regardless of household income. Now, from 2012-13, universities will be able to charge up to £6,000 a year for a course. However, universities can charge up to £9,000 a year if they meet tougher widening participation schemes. And as you can see from the PowerPoint there, this has gone up quite considerably from £3,375 currently to between £6,000 and £9,000 for tuition fees by the time your sons or daughters go to university. If a university charges more than £6,000, they have to take part in the National Scholarship Programme, meaning they have to provide scholarships and bursaries for students from lower income households. The situation in Scotland is a little bit more complex and actually still unclear. I've put there what the current situation is, but the situation for 2012-13 will change, because the Scottish Parliament is very, very concerned that if they don't do something about their tuition fees, there'll be a mass influx of English students applying to Scottish universities. So we are expecting English students to have to pay more for a degree in Scotland than is currently the situation. I was reading The Guardian recently and they were estimating around £6,500 a year for English students studying in Scotland. Now, compared to £9,000, that does look cheap, but most Scottish universities are 4 years, so you have to take into account an extra year of studying at Scottish universities before you think that's the best option for you. Having said that, lots of students at our school do apply to Scottish universities as one or more of their choices. Okay, so what help is there towards tuition fees? Well, as I've said already, fees are no longer paid up front. They are paid by a loan company and paid back by the student later. Students have to apply for these loans using quite complex forms, and students and parents have to apply for these loans, and we will give help to students in year 13 about how to fill those forms in. Students will never see this money. This money is paid directly to the University of College, which probably isn't a bad thing. And students will start repaying these loans once they've left university and earning £21,000. That's actually gone up from £15,000. What is currently £15,000, but students only start paying back these loans once they're on £21,000. There is a reasonable rate of interest, but we'll be talking more about the repayments shortly. The information is saying that it's still possible to pay for these tuition fees up front. So students, if they don't want to accrue any debt, can pay for these tuition fees up front, but the information about that at the minute is still a little bit vague. Okay, if I can talk now about the second part of the financial implications for students going to university, which is students can also take out a loan to cover their living costs. I don't expect the situation to change much in 2012-13. I expect a similar situation as the current situation. There is no information about this yet, but if we go through the current situation, that will give you a fairly good idea of what the situation will be in 2012-13. As you can see, again, these loans for maintenance attract very low rates of interest. These are paid directly to the student in 3 instalments, one for each term, but students do need a bank account before they go to university to make sure they can get this money. Every student is entitled to 72% of this loan, regardless of parental income. The other 28% is means tested, and the idea being that parents or students make up the shortfall. As you can see there are different maintenance loans depending on where you go. If you're living at home, it's £3,838. If you are living away from home but not in London, it's £4,950, and for London there you can see the cost as well. Just to give you an example, for a student perhaps who is living away from home but outside London, the end column there, every student would be entitled to £3,564 of the loan. The remaining 28% is means tested, so the remaining 1,386 will be means tested on parental income. You can see that I've given some figures on the current situation. No contribution for income up to 50,778, but then parents possibly contribute £1 for every £5 of income above 50,778. As I said already, the figures for 2012-13 aren't out yet, but there is a proposal to raise the threshold to 60,000. So instead of the threshold stopping at 50,778, it will raise to 60,000. I think we need to give a cautionary note here that these loans will not cover completely living costs. Estimations of living in London say living costs are at least £12,000, living elsewhere, living costs at least £10,000. So these maintenance loans will not cover living expenses. Okay. Now, in terms of repayment of these loans, at the end of the student's degree, the tuition fee loan and the maintenance loan are added together, and students leave with a degree but also one big debt. As we've said already, they don't start paying for this until they're earning £21,000, and they pay 9% on anything they earn above £21,000. So to give an example, £25,000, that's £4,000 above £21,000, 9% of 4,000 is 360, so students will pay around £30 a month, not taking into account interest rates. The balance is written off after 30 years. It currently is 25 years, but the balance is now going to be written off after 30 years. Now, what the paperwork is saying, that early repayments will be considered, but there probably will be a charge for paying off the debt early. The coalition government is making a big point that because they've raised the threshold from 15,000 to 21,000, students will be paying less, but obviously they'll be paying less for longer. Okay. What further help is there available? There is additional support for students in the form of a maintenance grant, and the situation for 2012-13 is this will stay in place, and it's a non-repayable grant for which students can get up to £3,250 a year. I've put in there the proposed household incomes for students who will get this grant, and you can see there if anybody's earning the household income is 25,000 or less, they will receive the full grant of £3,250. Up to £42,000 they'll receive a partial grant. Above £42,000 no grant at all. Unfortunately, the top threshold, 42,000, has gone down from the current situation, which is 50,000. If you do get a maintenance grant, that does impact on the maintenance loan you can get, and you can see there the maintenance loan will be reduced by 50p for every £1 of maintenance grant you get. Once again, maintenance grants are paid in 3 instalments for each term. There are also bursaries and scholarships. Now, as I've mentioned already, any university charging more than £6,000 will have to take part in a kind of national scholarship programme that have to provide greater support for students from lower income households. The information about that is particularly vague, so what I've put down is the current situation, and you can see there that bursaries do vary from £338 to £3,000. Many universities will give bursaries currently to students who are getting part or all of the maintenance grant. It's also important to mention that scholarships are currently available, and I expect those to remain. Scholarships are available at many universities, and they will remain in 2012 and 13. We do not have information on every scholarship available because there are so many out there, so students do need to be proactive and try and find out about the scholarships that they may be entitled to when they're applying to a particular university or course. Once they find out about them, we will try and help them apply for those. Okay. In terms of useful websites, all of the information for this presentation has come from the websites below. As I've said to you already, it's hard to get concrete information on 2012-13, but the government have guaranteed that all information will be available for the current Year 12s before they start Year 13. That can just remind you that the emphasis of the Higher Education Bill remains the same, that students will pay for the cost of their higher education, not parents, once they've graduated, and the idea behind that is that more and more students from whatever income household they come from will be able to apply to university. Okay. Now, the final slide is about, is a degree worth the debt? Well, I've got to say, I think students need to think much more carefully about the cost of going to university for 2012-13 than perhaps they ever have before with the increase in tuition fees. And is a degree worth it is a harder question to answer now than it ever has been. Up until fairly recently I was saying yes, a degree is worth it because of the extra income that students will get. That's less certain now. As you can see there, the Telegraph highlighted that now 40% of students go to university compared to 10% a generation ago. And graduate employability does really depend on the degree that the students are doing, the prospects in that field for jobs afterwards, and the university attended. Many people still say that a degree will lead to greater income in the long term, but obviously students need to think very carefully about whether a degree is the right option for them in terms of the debt it will accrue.